Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Dottie. I have been a radio presenter for 4 years and a TV presenter for just under 1 year. So it is with great pride and honour that I am joined by these esteemed trailblazing women from the television industry. Before me, 5 legendary women from the small screen, I think is putting it lightly, who have worked, I guess, all of you for sort of more than 40 years in the industry, some for less. Some for less. And all of you have won many awards between you. I'll be asking our panellists today to consider what advice they would be giving their younger selves if they could. And I'll also be finding out their thoughts on the current climate of TV. If you've got any questions, I will urge you to put your hands up. If you want to do it the convoluted digital way, you can submit anonymous questions via the app. It's all very, very complicated. No, it's very easy. They'll pop up in front of me and I can ask those questions anonymously. Before we sort of go around the table, let's take a look at some of the incredible work that our panellists have produced, commissioned and starred in across the 40 years or so. Now, quick warning, some of this footage was many megapixels ago, okay? Some of it's going to be grainy, guys, but feast your eyes on this. Right, lots. Incredible work there, both in front of and behind the camera, and lots to discuss. And bear in mind, if any questions just pop into your mind as we go, do log into that app and submit your Q&A questions. Before we get into the many things that were just in that little VT, if we could go around the table, please, if you could introduce yourself and let us know your first job in TV and what you're working on now, starting with you. Arlene.
I'm Arlene Phillips. I'm a director and choreographer in theatre and an occasional television visitor. I actually, my first job in television was by accident. I had created a dance group called Hot Gossip, and they were, although I'd had the group for 3 years, never ever got on television. They were asked to do a show called the Kenny Everett Video Show, and it became an immediate hit, but Mary Whitehouse, a well-known protector of public morals, self-appointed, decided this should not be on television. And because the group was called Arlene Phillips Hot Gossip, I became what is known as a celebrity and was invited to talk on every possible show, sometimes about dance, but mostly about things I didn't know a lot about. And that was my first jobs in TV. And I'm now a sort of semi-celebrity, so every time there is a new group of celebrities going on Strictly Come Dancing, I'm again invited back onto television, not so eagerly, I might add, to talk about what I think about them, what I think about the curse of Strictly, and for me, that's currently the only television I get asked to do.
Paula.
I'm Paula Wilcox and I'm an actress, and my first job was that one that you've just seen up there on your screens with Richard Beckinsale in The Lovers. And I got that job because I was in the National Youth Theatre and I was 18 and I was asked to audition for it because there was a producer in the audience one night in the show that I was in at the time with the National Youth Theatre as a kid. And Jack Rosenthal, who was the writer of that series, was also there with the producer. And I got asked if I'd audition for it, and eventually I got the part. So that was my first job in television. And currently I'm doing 2 series I'm in. One is Upstart Crow, which is Ben Elton's brilliant comedy about the life of William Shakespeare. I play Mary Arden, his mother. And the other show is for Sky Television, with whom I've done a lot of work recently, and they make some great programmes. And the one that I'm currently in is called Living the Dream, which is about a family who, you know, live in Yorkshire, and Dad decides it's time to throw in the towel in Yorkshire because it's too cold and too wet, and they go to move to Florida, and it's about their adventures in America. So that's what I'm currently doing.
Amazing.
Wow.
Olivia?
I'm Olivia Lichtenstein. I'm a documentary filmmaker and a partner at Storyvault Films, an independent production company. My first job in television as a graduate was I had a degree in Russian, and I then went to work for ABC News in their London bureau as a production assistant, which was sort of the way that girls got into television, by doing something really quite sort of rudimentary. But I was very lucky because it was a small and busy bureau at a very interesting time politically, and so I was quickly promoted to foreign news desk editor. And then I got called to work at the BBC because I spoke Russian, so that kind of worked out for me in a way. I've currently just been directing my first feature-length documentary for theatrical release, which is about the R&B superstar Teddy Pendergrass. And so that's just come to the end of that.
Amazing.
And I'm Selena Scott, and I'm back on my old stomping ground in Scotland. I started at Grampian Television. This was after being turned down by the BBC as a news trainee. They said to me that I should go out and get experience in the provinces. And I took them at their word and went to Grampian Television, which at that stage was the oil capital of Europe, so it was very exotic. So Texans were walking around with cowboy boots and cowboy hats and extremely glamorous, and I was off to the oil rigs every day. And then, of course, I realised afterwards, I was just telling Olivia that when I revisited the whole thing about the BBC trainee scheme, I discovered that all the intake of that year that I was turned down for were all guys from Oxbridge whose only experience was editing the university newspaper. But I had gone off diligently to do my thing at Grampian. But it was great to be back. The Scots were, you know, really welcoming, and it was a fine grounding for me. My latest excursion into television is as an old age pensioner on the real Marigold Hotel. I mean, I resisted going on this programme because everyone's called a pensioner. And I, with my feminist hat on, I thought, why should we all be labelled like this? But anyway, I did it, and I'm glad I did it. We went to Rajasthan and had a wonderful time, and it wrapped up last night, much to my relief.
I'm Dorothy Byrne. I'm the head of news and current affairs at Channel 4. I began as Richard and Judy's researcher, and may I say I played a key role in them getting together. So probably my greatest moment in TV. And now I'm Jon Snow's boss. So I've always worked with legends, and now at last I am a legend for an hour. So thank you very much.
What an incredible panel. And Dorothy, you say, as you said, you've worked in news and current affairs for 20 years now?
Oh, if only it was that. No, I think you'll find it's actually 36 years.
Wow, wow. I underestimated by more than a decade.
Well done.
I know. What was it like starting out, and how do you think things have changed now?
Well, on my first day in TV, my female boss told me that I would go out and learn how to be a director, and that the man taking me out would sexually assault me, but I wasn't to take it personally because he sexually assaulted everybody. And sure enough, it was perhaps the only time in TV where the words of a boss came to absolute fruition, because he did sexually assault me. And of course, in those days, you know, how was I to make a complaint to my boss? Because she'd actually told me that that would happen to me. So
what did you do?
Well, he put his hand up my skirt, so I just took his hand back down my skirt and said, no, thank you. But now...
And that was the end of it?
And that was the end of it. I'm not saying there weren't worse things that happened than that, but now I can honestly tell you that I have never said to anybody who was starting out at Channel 4, hello, tomorrow you'll go out and learn how to do your job and somebody will sexually assault you. So things have improved, I think.
Good to know. Good to know. Please make sure you're taking notes. By the way, these are all crucial tips. We are going to speak about sort of #MeToo in more detail. Selena, there was a part in that VT that we saw where you really well put that guy back in his place. What have been some of your encounters with interviewees? I hear you had a bit of an interesting run-in with Donald Trump.
Yes, that was about 20 years ago. And yes, I watch CNN on a regular basis just to see, you know, how Trump is getting on, because I guess I was the only one that predicted he was going to win, because he's the kind of guy that he pushes back the whole time and people roll over. I learned a lot from Donald Trump about, well, I had a crash course in courage from Donald Trump, because he was allowed to come back into Britain after I'd done my documentary and trash me on live television, because the bosses at ITV at that time were so terrified of him. He threatened them with legal action, but there was nothing that he could have done to stop this film. There was nothing in the film which we couldn't defend. But the guys in charge, with this force of nature, backed off. And it was scheduled to be shown in the States. He was on the cusp of bankruptcy when I did the documentary, so everyone was interested in the States as to whether he was going to survive or not. And he ended up telling a whole pack of lies. I mean, I have to kind of, on one side, see it from Donald Trump's point of view. I had two cameras, one on him, one on me. And when we did the final interview, after 2 weeks of following him around, one of the cameras went down. And I was relaxing in the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, finished the gig, when the producer came to me and said, "Selena, I'm afraid the camera's gone down on Donald. You're going to have to go back and do the interview again." This was a 2-hour interview. I said, I can't possibly do that. I can't do that. Well, if you don't, we don't have a documentary. So off I went, and I said to Donald, we've got to do the documentary again. I'm terribly sorry, the interview again, because it went down. Standing by his side was Michael Cohen. And Michael Cohen said to Donald Trump, this is a setup. Don't do it. If you do it, I smell a rat here. But Donald was thinking, I can improve on my first interview.
Brilliant.
And he thought, and so he said, and his ego and his vanity got the better of him, and he said, I'll do it. So we sat down and we did it again. And I really did feel bad, because when I got it back to Britain and we ran the tape, the first camera interview worked perfectly well. It was all okay. It was there. So I had 2 interviews with Donald Trump. One interview said one thing, and one interview said another. Do you own the Empire State Building? 100%. The next one, well, 20%. So I intercut it with the music It Ain't Necessarily So, and Donald went ballistic. And since then, we've had this massive feud, and it's gone on and on and on and on. But anyway, he's President of the United States.
Wow. What a gripping story that was, like a BBC drama. And we saw in the clip that there was that guy he was clearly coming on to you. Did you have to deal with that quite a lot?
You're sharp.
Was it a daily thing?
Well, I mean, I look at myself and I think, my God, I can see why a lot of women, you know, just couldn't take to this creature on television, because, you know, I was there with everything, you know, the hair, the makeup, the lot, and yeah, but I mean, you know how to deal with men. I mean, you said, you know, you take your hand and you say, that's it, you know, keep your hands to yourself. You have to. You don't mess around with guys. But guys are very uncomplicated, actually. You know, you don't. There is a way, if you can do it, of handling it all. Yeah. That's you know that's how I've managed to get through all of this. Yeah.
So Arlene, for you, had there been, in terms of sexism and it being quite prevalent, we were talking before a little bit about it being quite inherent, have you had any experiences that you felt maybe wouldn't happen now?
I have seen a lot of experiences that absolutely would not happen now. But even back in the 70s, 80s, working with dancers, I realized recently that self-preservation and ownership of your body comes from your education, both from your parents and from your school. And obviously it was certainly lacking when I was growing up, but with the young dancers I work with, who are probably 18 in the late 70s, in the 80s, 19, 20, young people, there was a mix. There were horrible incidents that I watched, and that I wanted to become very protective of maybe a star groping a dancer, and me getting very motherly and stopping it, and to the fury of the dancer saying, to me, coming to me saying, I was offered the option and I took the option, so we will be meeting later. And I was sort of quite surprised, because some of the very obvious things that were going on, yes, they were one-night stands or whatever they may be, but there was a sense of protection for me because of young people that I had hired to dance. And for me, I was always the short, chunky one that nobody bothered with, so I kind of escaped any manhandling. Also, I was quite bossy. I would stand my ground with any director. And I have to say, when I was first in the industry as a choreographer, there was obviously Flick Colby, who was Pants People. There was a little clip of Pants People earlier. I was working in television, but there really weren't women in television as choreographers or in the theatre. It was all men. So I felt that I had to battle and stand up and be strong as any man and tell people what to do, but certainly protect the dancers around me, despite very often they're not wanting to be protected. And quite frankly, some of them got themselves into dreadful trouble because they were not educated to say, this isn't right. You know, fun times, good times, you know, the freedom of, you know, the pill gave a lot of young dancers an independence that they felt they were owning. They could take on the role of a man. They could ask anyone to do anything they wanted, but sometimes it didn't end in a good way.
Well, we have got an incredible panel, guys. The questions are already coming in, and we will get to them. Paula, I wanted to get your thoughts, actually, because we saw some of your early work there, and there were a lot of clips there, actually, of men sort of fawning over women. Do you think this is an inherently sexist business, or was that maybe a reflection of the time?
I don't know that it's an inherently sexist business. I think that it goes on everywhere, doesn't it? I think there are probably maybe more opportunities when you're acting with people. But I know quite recently, in the sort of early 2000s, I was doing a series, and I just happened to be chatting between shots with two of the younger actors, and they were talking about how difficult they were finding it to know how to approach somebody, a woman that they really liked, because they felt a little bit kind of powerless and a bit confused about how far you could sort of push it if you were keen on somebody and wanted to sort of see them again. They both said they were having difficult, and they said to me, what was it like when you were working in the 70s? You know, with men, I mean, did they have difficulty, you know, talking to you and stuff? And I said, well, basically, you just got groped all the time. And you did, I mean, but you learnt, rather like Arlene, I think I was quite bossy and I could, you know, give people a put down with a couple of words. And I remember, and also like you'd avoid situations. I remember going into a rehearsal room once and only one of the actors had showed up so far, and I was a bit early. And I thought, I'm not going to stay in this room alone with him. So I said, I'm just going to leave my bag down there. I need to go to the loo, back soon. And I went off until, you know, I knew that there'd be other people around before I went in. So you could, you know, you could sort of work things like that. But I did do I was in a Benny Hill. We were talking about Benny Hill. I did do a Benny Hill show, and I was in a sketch with him, and we met, and he was very nice actually, and he was, you know, very sort of clever writer, etc., very successful, and he was introduced to me. So, Benny, this is Paula Wilcox. I was very young. I mean, I was probably about 20 by that point, and he said to me, he looked at me and he said, "Oh, Paula Wilcox, eh?" Oh, and I said, "Paula won't Cox." And anyway, I never had any trouble after that, and I don't know whether anybody else did, but he was, you know, he was fine with me, really. Well, he was fine, you know. But I think, as Arlene says, you needed to kind of know how to deal with it.
Paula won't Cox. That is that is worthy of being printed on a T-shirt. It is. Olivia, a lot of the stories we hear from women in TV quite often are littered with these stories about interactions with men in positions of power. Michaela Coel spoke about it in her lecture yesterday. What is your experience then as being a woman and a boss?
Well, first I want to pick up on a word that both Arlene and Paula used, which we as women always use and we shouldn't, which is that we say we're bossy. And that is a word that applies to women only. And actually, if you are the boss, in its purest sense, you should be bossy, because you're the boss. But I think that the adjectives used to describe women who are, you know, successful and empowered and manage to achieve things, it's always, oh, she's a bit tricky, or she's very bossy, or feisty. And I just think that language doesn't help us, and it's really difficult because I use it too, you know, and I think we should sort of be aware of that. I think the intrinsic problem was always this feeling and the kind of culture that there was, which was that somehow men were more important than women. And even if you were doing the same job, that they had this kind of privilege about them. And I remember occasions where I was making a film, so when I was at the BBC, and a man was making a film, and we were both, you know, equal filmmakers making films for the same strand, and I was in the middle of talking to the editor of the strand, and this guy came in and immediately just took over and talked across me, and I very deliberately turned on my heel and went out, because I suddenly was aware of, God, this happens all the time. And so, and he came and apologised to me afterwards, actually. So, so this was always difficult because then you felt, you know, you were being difficult. So I think that when I became a boss, and I was editor of Inside Story, which was BBC One's flagship documentary strand at the time, apart from all of those sort of feelings that one has when you get a job like that, and sort of imposter syndrome and terror and, you know, all of that stuff that you just sort of have to overcome and get on with, I kind of made a decision that I was just going to be me and be authentic and be a woman. And I was a woman with young children, and I wasn't going to apologise for that. Because I think there was a culture in television at the time where you felt that even if you had children, somehow you didn't want, you know, you couldn't make allowances. And I remember when I came back to work after maternity leave with a 5-month-old baby, the first thing I was told to do was to go to Japan and make a film. I don't think that would happen now, but anyway, and you didn't feel you could say no, but I did manage to get out of it. So I felt that I wasn't going to be apologetic about that, and I was also going to be make it possible for the people who worked for me to be mothers and producers and directors and whatever else that they did. So I think that that was a great time in my career, actually, because I was able to sort of, you know, live it properly. And I think that also there was, but nonetheless, you know, certain things sort of still persisted. And I think there was always this thing where you would go to these meetings, particularly at the BBC, and this was probably in the 90s, and you'd go into a room and it would just be full of men in grey suits. And it was quite frightening sometimes to, you know, bring your voice out. And there was also this weird thing that I'm sure every woman in this room has experienced, of being in a meeting and making a point and having it be ignored, and then having a man make the same point immediately afterwards. And somebody going, very good point, John. And I realised what the problem was, and it is that our voices are so high only dogs can hear them. But the interesting thing is that actually what has happened is that over time, women's voices have got deeper. And the reason for this is to do with, you know, getting parity in the workplace and, you know, establishing status. And I think, isn't that interesting that there's been a sort of physiological change, which is that our voices have actually dropped?
It's one of the first things that Margaret Thatcher did when she became Prime Minister, wasn't it? To lower her voice, to get voice training.
Yeah.
The evolution.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it?
Now, Dorothy, you too are a boss, and you became a boss because you wanted to have a child.
Yes, that's true. I should say, by the way, I was born with a very loud, deep voice, so I
predestined.
Yeah, but I have been mistaken at a big event at Channel 4 for the waitress by 2 editors of national newspapers. But yes, I was one of those women who forgot to have a baby, who appear in the postcard. And then I thought, oh, I worked on World in Action, where when I started, I was actually the only woman at the time on the programme. And I thought one of the problems in current affairs is that the only people who stay in the office are the bosses. So I applied to be a boss. And actually, I know lots of single parents say, if I hadn't been a single parent, I could have done so many things. But actually, I was a producer-director on World in Action, and if I hadn't left to become a boss on another programme, I would have ended up working on Tonight with Trevor McDonald. And now I'm the head of News and Current Affairs. And that's all because each time a job came up, I thought, I have to get that job, because I've got a child.
I did the same. That's why I took the editor's job as well, because I had 2 small children, and I thought at least I can, even if I have to work
you can go home.
I can go home. Yeah.
So it was an extra motivation, which is incredible. One thing I want to speak about today is the gender pay gap, because we are here to reveal all. Arlene, strictly, were you receiving the equal pay? Were you aware of that, whether you were or weren't?
The only thing that I know is when we first started, we were on a very, very, very low figure. And I think that we all got the same. 2 of us with the same agent, Bruno and I with the same agent. And I think we all got the same. And we seem to have got the same until at the part where I was dismissed. I see that it's all changed now, and I mean, I can't figure it out, you know, why. I think it's Bruno gets more than Craig, if you believe what you read in the papers. Bruno tells me it's all rubbish, everything you read in the paper, constantly. But I believe that we did. Because when we all started, we all came from such different backgrounds, and Len and I were the first 2 that were actually hired, and then the other 2 came in. But now, I have not a clue.
So what do you think, Paula? Do you think it's the responsibility of the agents, maybe, to be ensuring that their female clients and their male clients are
Yes, maybe it is.
Level?
I mean, I don't know what anybody else gets when I work on a show. I do know when I'm in theatre that we're all getting the same. If we're working in repertory theatres or whatever, generally everybody's on the equity minimum or just above it. But usually everybody's on the same in an average theatre job. In television, it's I think it's a bit different, isn't it? Because I think also in television, it has a lot to do with how popular an actor or an actress is perceived to be. And so you could argue that one person is more famous than the other, one person might bring in more viewers than another. But I think it's crazy when people are doing basically the same job and are basically of a similar kind of age and vintage as each other, that they don't get the same. It does seem a bit well, it's totally wrong.
It's erratic.
It's a bit crazy.
Really, I think, erratic. And it's very hard to compare because a lot of the BBC artists do different programmes. So you don't know, one programme may take up 95 hours of a week, another one may take up 6 hours. It's very hard to compare, but I don't think it should come from the agents. I think everything should be, as in theatre, it's set, it's there. There are categories, and they're kind of strongly adhered to.
Well, Dorothy, you have the privilege of seeing the paychecks on Channel 4.
Well, I know my pay is equal because they brought people in to check it was equal. I asked 3 times. So obviously whether my pay was equal was my #1 priority. I didn't make the error of putting others before me. And I know, you know, we knew this legislation was coming as well, you know, for years. So we've done exercises over time to check on equality of pay. And in some cases, men were getting slightly less than women. But, you know, going through all the salaries to check that people are equally paid is a big job of work. And I was a bit surprised that some broadcasters got taken by surprise by legislation that was announced years ago.
Yeah. And so with news presenters, for example, are they quite balanced with men and women on Channel 4?
If you're doing the same job as another presenter, yes, you get the same pay.
Okay, good to know. Remember, make notes, guys. Make notes. We may need to refer to these notes. Now, Me Too is something I wanted to touch on as well. Selena, what are your thoughts on the Me Too movement?
I think that it's great if it gives women, young women particularly, confidence. You see, I actually think that the equal pay row is all down to women. Women aren't transparent, they don't have the confidence to talk about money. Guys use it as a way of keeping score. I mean, look at Jim Ratcliffe, who went to the Sunday Times Rich List and showed them all his financial documents because he wanted to be #1. I remember Warren Buffett ages and ages ago, and when asked, you know, about the amount of money he was making, he said, it's not the amount of money I'm making, it's the fact that I can keep score. Now, women have never been in that. None of us know what we earn. We never talk about the money. We talk about everything else. We talk about menopause, babies, everything. But we actually
women talk about menopause much.
No.
To be honest, when I talked about menopause, I mean, everybody went, oh my God, she talked about the menopause. So I just have to correct you there on that one point, if you don't mind.
Well, we've spoken a lot about sexism. Let's talk about ageism, Selena, because you actually famously took Channel 5 to court.
Yes. Yes, I felt that the hypocrisy on British television was so overwhelming that I couldn't sit back. I mean, I prefer liars like Donald Trump, actually, to hypocrites. And I felt this kind of this thing about older women on British television were being, you know, shoved off because, and it wasn't because of me. A lot of people mistook the fact that I took Channel 5 to court because I wanted to be on television. That wasn't it at all. It came about because of a set of circumstances which involved me, in which my arm was twisted to go on to Channel 5, and I decided that I would do it for a certain amount of time. And then certain things transpired, and I felt if I sat back and let it happen, then I wasn't being true to myself. After all these years, if I sat back and let this happen, and you know, it was no good. So I bet the house on it. I went to a solicitor, I went to Schillings, and I said, how much is it going to cost me? And they said £20,000. I thought, oh God, £20,000, where am I going to find that? Anyway, I thought, I can find £20,000 if I'm convinced that I'm going to get there. And of course, with lawyers, 20,000 became 30,000, then it became 50,000. And then I was told at the end of it all, because it was going to go to an industrial tribunal, and this was the only time I heard about it, that if I did not accept an offer from the other side now, I turned it down. If it went to the industrial tribunal and they found against me, I would have to pay not only my own costs, but theirs as well. So I was left with this enormous burden on my shoulders, but I was determined, so off I carried on, and it was eventually, I won it, yeah.
Excellent. Now that was obviously a crusade, you standing up for something that you believed in. Olivia, do you think women in the industry, and maybe beyond the industry, struggle with actually speaking up and asking for what they think they deserve?
I think very much so. I mean, I think also something Michaela was talking about in her McTaggart lecture yesterday was about this need for transparency. And I think that I think there's still this sort of slight feeling of, clinging on and being grateful, so you don't want to rock the boat too much, so people don't want to, make trouble. And I think that we should just be much more bullish about it. And I think that also women sometimes feel grateful, and then whereas a man will be very sort of forthright with, right, okay, so, this is going to cost you this much, or this is the idea. What are you giving us for development? I think that is harder for women to do. And I do think also that women need to be helping each other more, because I think that there's long been a slight culture of women who've done well and sort of made it, feeling that there's only room for one, and sort of needing to pull the ladder up behind them. And so I think that we need to be much more sort of inclusive about all of that. And I think the good thing about Me Too is that actually it has, I think, started to create an environment where people have actually had enough. And so there is a kind of zero tolerance. And I find that really exciting, and I'm really excited when I see the way that my 25-year-old daughter talks, and her, the way she is, and the way she deals with unwanted attention. And so I do feel, there's sort of lots of progress that's been made, but I do also feel that, I feel sort of slightly sad, because I think that there was a sense in which I think we thought we'd sort of solved quite a lot of this, and somehow, almost like we took our eye off the ball about 20 years ago, and then suddenly you think, oh my God, here we are, and what was it all for, and why aren't we further on? So I think it's really great to be having conversations like this, and I mean, I'm interested to know, for example, does what we're talking about, does this sound alien to you, or does this sound sort of within your experience as a young woman in the industry?
Do you know what, I think, and you made a point earlier, which was kind of about taking the opportunities for yourself. I think women, from my experience, especially working in the BBC, aren't scared, and I speak for my experiences, but aren't scared to ask for what they want. My agent is sitting right here and knows that I'm not scared to, she'll vouch for that. I'm not scared to say, I think we should be doing this, or I think maybe I deserve this, or should we look into this opportunity? But I think that's because we stand on the shoulders of women like you, who did a lot of the work, opened many of the doors, that you have maybe given us the confidence and given us the freedom, actually, to now ask for things that we deserve, because you are the trailblazing women. So. I don't want to get teary-eyed. I don't want to get teary-eyed.
I think that young women, through Me Too, have given older women the power to talk about the awful things that happened to them in the past, actually. Yeah, right. So I think thank you to you. Yeah, exactly. And you called yourself Dorothy.
After you. We are running short on time, actually. I wanted to actually go around the table again and get your thoughts on the advice you would give to your younger self, because we've spoken about your experiences, and I guess that would put you in a place to make an informed statement to yourself maybe 30 years or so ago. What would your advice be to your younger self, Arlene?
Well, it's probably not very Me Too, but I always wanted to be a ballerina. And I was short, I was stocky, and even though I did become a brilliant dancer, I was never going to achieve my dream. But I also lived quite a difficult life. There was a lot of poverty. I lost my mother when I was quite young. And I never felt like I was someone. I never felt I had a good body. I never felt that I was pretty. I never felt sort of anything. And then I realized that I had to fight for my career, and I went along like a bull in a china shop, determined I was going to make something of myself, invent something, create something, do something. But the one thing throughout that was, and I sort of almost touched on it before when I was talking about the way I felt in myself. I was surrounded by beautiful dancers with exquisite bodies, with exquisite looks, and I always wanted to be just pretty. And very recently, maybe a year or 2 years, as I've gone through my life, one of my PA started posting photographs of me that had taken throughout the jobs I've done on Instagram. And I look back and I wish that I had had the confidence, because I look back and I think, you actually were everything you wanted to be. And so now, you know, with my daughters, with everybody I meet, is just believe in yourself. You don't have to be a perfect 5'6" blonde with butterfly blue eyes and a great figure to be okay. And for me, it's been a revelation. I know it's not very Me Too, but it has been a revelation. And I was going to say, for everyone growing up, believe in yourself.
We've got some tears. It's gone from loose women to therapy. Paula, what advice would you give your younger?
Oh, I think maybe enjoy yourself a bit more and don't worry about the future so much. If I'd known how lucky I was to be doing those sitcoms at that time of my life and at that time of television, because you know, all the things that we've talked about were worrying and are terribly worrying now. And, but, you know, they were great times to be working in television because everything was kind of up for grabs. And when I was first working, there were only, I think, 2 or 3 channels available. So everything that you did was really visible. And we were working with a lot of producers who'd come out of theatre, who really wanted to work with writers and actors. And it was quite thrilling looking back at the innovation that was going on and the fun that we were all having. And I think, you know, looking back, all I wanted to do was work for the RSC. That's all I wanted to do. And I thought what I was doing was so silly. And looking back, it was brilliant. It really was good. And so much of what I was doing actually was at that time terribly cutting edge, because believe it or not, The Lovers was about 2 18-year-old, 19-year-old kids who he wanted to get her into bed and she wanted to get married. And they argued about it the entire time, and he never got her into bed and she never got married, but that was they were both, that's what they wanted, both of them. And the discussions that they would have were really cutting edge at the time, and there had been no sitcoms about young people before that. And so that was brilliant. And then we did Man About the House, which was about a man sharing with 2 women. And it, you know, that was considered, ooh, you know, quite shocking at the time. So, you know, we were breaking ground then, although it doesn't seem like it now. But they were brilliant times. So I should have known that.
Olivia, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Well, I would like to give this to myself and every young woman, and to quote the fabulous Nora Ephron, which is, be the heroine of your life, not the victim. And take action, do the stuff. There's a great phrase in there, take the trip, buy the shoes, eat the cake. So just do it, be authentic, be compassionate, and use your voice. And don't take no for an answer, and persist in the things you believe in.
Selena, your advice to your...
So I'm just interested with all these wonderful women sitting here, that, you know, that someone in America once said that within every older woman there's a young girl wondering what the hell happened. You know, I was reminded that I came into television on the wave of this massive gender revolution, you know, the opuses of Germaine Greer and Marilyn French and Naomi Wolf were either being written or or they were in the middle of writing, and I was like, you know, Arlene and well, all of us here had to fight to get, you know, that first step to, you know, follow that particular star. And I wish it's to the point really. I wish I didn't have to tell my younger self this, but I have to, that when it came to my life in television, and although I offered a helping hand to other women in television, I'm afraid it was the men in television and in my life who supported me and continue to support me right up until the ageism thing. It wasn't the women who were out there for me, it was the men, and I understand why. I just wished it had been different. But that's my advice to my younger self, not to expect too much. But I think for younger women today, I think it's changing. And I hope that you do support one another, for any younger woman here, to support one another, to be open about it, not to be jealous, not to compete in stupid ways with other women. You know, life is extremely short, and I'm afraid here I am at whatever age, and I simply can't believe it's gone by as quickly as it has.
Well, I have to say I've been helped massively by both men and women, but in particular by Claudia Milne, who set up 2020, who really was a big driving force in my career. So I have been really helped by women. I would say to my younger self, be really pushy and ambitious and marry a builder.
On that note, with minutes to spare, I open up the floor to questions. Maybe we've got a few right at the back. If we can bring some of the mics there.
Hello, hi. The Directors UK brought out a report yesterday which showed that over the last 3 years the number of women directing UK television has dropped from a pretty awful 27% to a pathetic 24%. Now, how much do you think this is due to the structure of the industry that mitigates against women working behind the camera?
Olivia, do you want to... I'm just going to put you on the spot.
Well, I know I was aware of that report and I was really depressed about it, and I think in factual it's gone down sort of 9-point-something%, and it just seems really strange, doesn't it? I mean, I guess that, you know, I suppose there are still issues about who does the childcare, you know, and that makes it difficult sometimes to do those jobs. But I mean, you know, rather than, I think, sort of women accepting the blame for it, I think, you know, what are the broadcasters doing about it? And why aren't they being vigilant and making sure that there is sort of parity? And because otherwise it sort of speaks of a prevailing culture where, you know, the boys are still getting the big jobs. But I don't know, I mean, Dorothy, that's, you know, is that something you can, I don't know.
Well, you don't ask why something is bad, you say it just has to stop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't care why it's bad, it has to stop.
But how do we stop it?
Just embarrass all the broadcasters here, embarrass everybody, change the law. I don't know how you do it, but we have to stop asking why things are the way they are and just say they have to stop.
And also encouraging people leaving school, that there are opportunities, great opportunities, going into schools, trying to galvanise women to take on these roles. I think it's vital.
Yeah. There was actually a report today that TUI Airlines are giving away, they give away little badges to children who must be getting on the planes, I assume. And the boys' badges say future TUI captain, and the girls' badges say future TUI cabin crew. and if that's how you're being brought up, of course you don't see yourself as a director, you see yourself as something a little lower down the pay scale.
Another question back there.
This is just to Paula. I was lucky enough to grow up in a classic sitcom 70s with George and Mildred. Some others do have them, Rising Damp, Man About the House. What do you think of the modern comedies? For me, the equivalent is something like Not Going Out. What do you think of the modern comedy?
Yes, I agree with you. There's a lot of great comedy out there. Fleabag is one, isn't it? It's quite brilliant. I'm trying to think of others and can't think of anything now. But yes, I mean, I think there's a lot of terrific comedy. You look at the one that I'm in, Upstart Crow, that Ben Elton has written, you know, that's brilliant, about Shakespeare, sitcom about Shakespeare, and it really works. So yeah, I think there was a sort of dodgy bit, wasn't there, where it wasn't, I don't know, I think a lot of comedy was trying to sort of find its place, but I think now there's so much that's really good. And quite a few are being made now with an audience, which is interesting, because that was looked on a few years ago as being terribly old-fashioned and very, very kind of passé, but they're sort of coming back. So I don't know if that's got anything to do with it, but I think there's so much brilliant comedy. Mum is brilliant. I don't know, trying to think.
I think we can squeeze in one more question. Let's get a question from a woman. We've got some women with their hands up here. Let's get some oestrogen out.
Hello. We're on a back-to-work scheme with media parents, most of us having had children and then getting back into TV. For those of you who have had children, what would you say was the best way to be the best mother that you can be and the best worker that you can be concurrently?
Wow, I mean, like, just don't try to be so perfect. I'd say.
That's that. I think that's it. Yeah. All right, quick last question. Is anyone near? If you could pass the mic to the lady behind you, we can squeeze in a last question.
Hi, it's a fab session, thank you. And I'm a freelancer, and it was really sad recently. There's always been an issue of pay for freelancers, whether you're male or female. But I heard the other day a freelance editor who had significantly reduced her rate because she said that she needed the work. And I said, yes, but she said she needed the work because she was a mother. And I said, well, but why? And she said, because if I have the same rate as everybody else and I don't undercut, I will get less, I won't get as much work, and I need the work to be able to support my family. And I said, yes, but if you charge the right amount, then you have to work less. It doesn't make sense that you're undercutting people and everybody's rate goes down. It was insane. And what I would love to see, a bit like the sustainability logo that is popping up on the end of programs, it would be fantastic to have a logo or a marker that shows the programming that supports equal pay, equal rights on their productions. So you know who you can work with, who will support that and carry it through, and you want to be part of that production and with those production staff that are on that programme.
Brilliant.
Well, good idea. We've heard a lot about mothers, and I have two children, and I know how difficult it is. But in the theatre world now, there is a big move to provide creche, to provide for performers, actors in theatre, to provide creches, and I think it has to be also in television, particularly when there's a series and every week you're there. The possibility of providing creches, I think, is something that has to be looked at as part of life today.
And that's it. That's actually all we have time for. A massive thank you to our sponsors, Pinewood TV Studios, and please a round of applause for our incredible panel.